Well, good day, everybody. Good day, East-West viewers from around the world. This is Philip Shaw from Dresden, Ontario, Canada. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. K Enamul Haque from Dhaka, Bangladesh, for another edition of East-West this month. And we were just discussing what we were going to talk about, what's going on in the world. And of course, there's a lot going on in the world that we've been talking about a lot over the last several months. I guess the World Cup's over because we can't talk about that anymore. But I was just talking to Enamul about some of his work in Bangladesh and how he was questioned by some of the business people there on some of his media appearances about they were concerned about inflation. And as we all know, we've had lots of inflation since the coming out of all the different problems we've had over the last few years. It's put some, or last few months and years, it's put some economic shocks into the global economy, and we've had a little bit more inflation than we'd like. And he was asked by some of these business people, well, when's it going to get under control? And can you give us a time where that might happen? But of course, from an economic perspective, it's very difficult to say. It's unlikely very soon, right? Because
Yes.
we have problems in Iran and between Iran and the United States and the Strait of Hormuz with supply shocks and shifts coming out of there almost on a daily basis. And of course, Russia and Ukraine, I don't know how you characterize that now. It's ongoing every day, but the technological changes in warfare has evened that up a little bit more, and Russia doesn't seem to have quite as much of an advantage as they used to have, and it continues to cause shocks in the supply of uh, different agricultural commodities, like for instance, grain coming out of the Black Sea has been really curtailed because of the shelling of the Ukrainian and the Russian ports for exporting grain, and all of the different bombings that are going on in Russia from Ukraine, as well as, that's causing problems in the world economy, probably not having an effect to dampen inflation. Over on my side of the world, we have a trade war going on, believe it or not, between the United States and Canada, which is probably Enamel finds that hard to believe, having lived here for several years when he's finishing his graduate work. But the Americans have put 50% tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel and automobiles. And now President Trump announced even more tariffs today above that, starting on January 1st, 2027. He refers to us as Canadians think they're just another state, but they're not another state. They feel entitled. And of course, in Canada, we don't feel any of that at all. And as Canadians, our leader broke off the agreement or the trade talks, I guess you could say. And now we're under punitive American tariffs here. And frankly, it's not going to be very pretty around here economically. There's going to be some economic pain unless things get worked out. I don't really see it being worked out. So after all of those things I've talked about, the problems here in North America between Canada and the United States, as well as what's going on in the Gulf between Iran and the United States, and as well as Russia and Ukraine. All of these factors that we've talked about in months are still going and still causing shocks and uncertainty in the global economy. And that's one reason that inflation is higher than everybody wants. But hopefully, Onamo will have a plan where he can tell the Bangladeshi businessmen in the future months that maybe it will come under better control, but I don't know. So anyway, Enamel, I'll turn it over to you and you can take it from there.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. I think the whole world is in a topsy-turvy situation right now with everywhere something is going on. I never thought that Canada, US will be fighting on these trade issues. That was big surprise for me. Even in Bangladesh, which is far outside the war zone technically, but we are all living in the war zone in the sense that oil price is up again. So that is one issue that is going to look into going to feed into the inflation game. If you think about it, with what you see all globally, if you have a cost of production going up, eventually prices will go up because somebody has to pay for it. In economics, as we always say, there's nothing free. So the same thing is happening. So interestingly, in Bangladesh, inflation is up. And one of the reason inflation is up because our production is not going up. Every day with population going up, our demand is going up. But our production system is stuck in. And partly because of our banking system crisis and partly the global war. So it's not just all blaming to the global world. If you look into the situation, our banking system has not recovered since the collapse of 2024 when the last government collapsed. So this is 2026. Banking sector is in big trouble. Many people who lost their savings to the bank because banks are almost near bankruptcy. Loan taken out of the bank on false fake papers were rampant in the economy. So the banks cannot get their money back, and they are in big trouble. Because so this is what happens. And on the top of it, I must say that there are lots of hearsay and lots of discussion that all banks are going to collapse, which I believe is not true. But because of this discussion, because sometimes central bank did not take the right step, now it's not that banks are collapsing. The depositors find that deposits are gone. Some people lost their savings. Some people lost their pension. Some people who are working hard in the Middle East decided to come back or wanted to come back after their work. They find their money is gone. So in a way, there's no trust in the banking system. I think that's the biggest trouble in the country. And successive government, the interim government led by Professor Yunus, did not address this properly. This government is also not been able to address the major issue that depositors must have a trust in the bank. So I think that is one issue. And unless the banks are in good shape, they cannot give money to the bankers, to the investor, not bankers, to the industrialist manufacturers who wants to expand their production capacity. So when you do not have a production capacity, prices are up. On the top of it, you have the second problem coming. The second problem is that because of the war, oil price is up. And this is our biggest problem in the economy right now. We have our electricity power failure almost 2, 3, 4 hours a day, which means even companies are shutting down their production. So this is something to me unexpected. Uh, I do not have a full picture of it. When I was talking to in the other day that we have a electricity production capacity of 30,000 megawatt. We never produce more than 16,000 megawatts. And yet government, because they are saying electricity shortage, now they're saying we're going to put more production capacity. So I, as a layman, I don't understand this. When you have a 30,000 megawatt production capacity, you are not producing 16,000 megawatts or more, half of it. You have a half of it idle capacity. We are paying for it using a particular agreement that the last government did. Last government means Hasina government did, which is called capacity charge, which means any production plant, even if they don't produce any electricity, government will pay for their capacity of production, which means we are paying for electricity which you are not using. So by this time, our production cost of electricity is almost double, and nobody is really clearing the picture. I looked at the statistics. I was also surprised to see that solar, which a lot of people think very important solution to the whole thing. In Bangladesh, solar production capacity is about 800 to 1,000 megawatt. And we don't produce more than 120, 130 megawatt. So you realize almost one-fourth of the capacity we are using. We have wind power capacity of 65 megawatt. We are not producing more than 15 megawatt, almost 15 megawatts. So, and even on a day, wind is produced as 1 megawatt. So you realize how much is 5 times the cost. So already, given all this scenario, I see the new government need to put hold of everything to find out what is the truth, who is telling the truth and who is not. That is, to me, that's the biggest trouble. And so inflation is up. And if there is anything happens in the agriculture sector, I hope it does not, we'll have another problem. Yesterday, that was a very interesting case. People looted fertilizer from the government shop. in other words, go down, which in other words, people were not given fertilizer. Fertilizer prices are up. So you can see the problem coming. And I'm giving this example in Bangladesh, probably is true in many other countries. So to me, inflation, and that's what businessman the other day was asking, that to how to control inflation in this economy. Uh, I don't see that coming down until next October, November, when the crop will be out. Probably that's the best time. Right now we are rainy season. Rainy season basically means flood season. So prices are up on many products. So that's the scenario in Bangladesh. How about in Canada?
Well, the thing for East-West viewers is I think your words are particularly salient because you're talking about some structural issues in a place like Bangladesh versus Canada and the United States, where those structural issues really, especially in Canada, don't quite exist like they do there with regard to our electrical capacity and our banking systems and things like that that are very stable. But
Mm,
large parts of the world is like Bangladesh, where these institutions are not very stable. And Namel talked about the past government faced some of the similar problems. Now they've got problems again. And the issues that are affecting inflation here in Canada, as well as the Western world, when you pile them on top of the infrastructure and the structural problems that Enamel's talking about, it just gets worse. It just gets worse. It would be nice to clean that up, but it's a very, very difficult thing to change the culture in some of those institutions. I remember one time years and years and years ago, it was back in the early 90s, I was in Bangladesh, and one person asked me how much money, what percentage does the electricity company get paid for the electricity they produce in Ontario, Canada? And I said, well, I assume it's 100%. I assume it's 100%, but maybe there is some bad debts somewhere along the lines. And he said, "Oh, well, here," he said, "they only get paid for about six, I don't know what he said, 40% of what they produce or something like that." Those are similar numbers to what you're talking about with regard to the capacity versus the actual production. There's something wrong there. But anyway, that's just a structural issue in Bangladesh. There would be, what's going to happen in Canada with our problem with our American trading partners is this is a huge structural fracture. Our prime minister says the American market and the Americans are different than they've ever been, and the American market is too because of that. And it has to do with President Trump. We all know he has a very unusual look at the world, and he looks at Canada as just simply should be another state of the United States, maybe similar to Greenland. I don't know. And anyway, but it's creating a structural problem where we will have probably less choice and higher prices and higher inflation because of that. So whether it's with regard to a structural problem with regard to in Bangladesh, with regard to how hydro is produced or the banking system runs, or whether it's a trade problem and global insecurity with regard to war and other things that is affecting inflation, it doesn't seem like that part of the economy is going to settle down very soon on this part of the world, and maybe not on yours too. But I know in the past when we've talked about the war in Iran and Iraq I'm sorry, Iran with the United States and Russia with Ukraine, we always hoped that peace would break out. And I still wish that so many times because
no,
it would make our global economics work so much better. But we know we don't live in that type of world.
I think my own feeling is that we have to wait until the election happens in the United States to see
Okay.
some changes. That's number one. My second issue is that I don't know much, but I'm listening to the issues of bond crisis, bond selling crisis of United States, so that is going to also create certain other problems. My own feeling is that this is a very difficult year for almost every country. They have to prepare for a slow movement of changes happening. Bond market, if American economy is now $40 trillion on loan, which is, it was only, yes, 6 months ago, it was 33, $34 trillion. Now it is $40 trillion. So you can see what is happening. And to me, this uncertainty is probably one of the biggest challenges that we have. On the top of it, what you just said, in terms of Canadian United States, the United States is putting hurdles for everyone. We have agreement with United States and Bangladesh, and there are lots of pressure for on Bangladesh not to, come up with other free trade contract, let's say with China, which is our biggest trading partner for import of goods and services. So the pressure is now everywhere. So my feeling is that until the global world come to see some changes in the American policy, I don't see this topsy-turvy situation will improve. I'm not sure about the war. It may continue for a long time. The way I see now is like Ukraine, another Ukraine. So that is going to be an issue. But unless American government changes their policy, which is a powerful economy, I see the whole world going to suffer quite a lot in this year.
But you can make an argument the Canadian strategy with the United States is to wait out the midterm elections in November.
Could be, could be. I agree. I agree.
It could be,
Yeah, it
yeah,
could be.
and that could be. But I find it very difficult to believe that there'll be much change then. And if there isn't, my goodness, I don't know what's going to happen. But if there is, you'll probably see quite a bit of change. So we'll have to see what happens.
Okay, so I think with that we can end this month's episode of East West. We hope for the best and hope for that something will change somewhere.
Thank you very much, Enamel.
Thank you.